morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bonds, and I'm very lucky to be joined by Dr. Avi Baruch of Previsico. Previsico is a name that I've already murdered about 5 times in our conversation this morning, but Avi, did I get it right that time?
You got it right, thank you.
Well, that's a good start. So, Avi, if you wouldn't mind, can you introduce the business and we can sort of get into the kind of depths of where it's relevant and pertinent to insurance?
Yeah, great, thanks. Previsico is a flood forecasting company that spun out of Loughborough University a couple of years ago. So at Loughborough, we've been working on a new technology for being able to forecast flooding, in particular surface water and small watercourse flooding. And we've been working on it for the last 20 years in partnership with the Environment Agency and the Cabinet Office. And following kind of the development of very kind of smart new technology, we decided to form a company to target the insurance sector and kind of the wider business community.
Yeah, great. With the how early? I mean, it's obviously it's been a 20-year project. So how? I mean, it has an obvious impact to kind of the insurance market for someone working in insurance. But from like the academic point of view, how early was it kind of into the process that people started saying, well, there's a business hat here and there's a business need, and then how long into that did it sort of jump into the insurance world, its application?
Yeah, well, it's kind of been obviously over 20 years. It's been kind of bubbling along. So it started off with my former PhD supervisor, Professor Yu. He developed his own hydrodynamic modeling software a long time ago, 20 years ago, and has been testing it very slowly in a number of different environments. And it's kind of been widely used by different academics in different environments. So kind of over the course of those 20 years, we've been able to test it for, coastal, river, surface water flooding and from Shanghai to New York, and so I guess over those 20 years we're building confidence in it. And I think the moment that I guess the first big step was in 2015-16 when the Cabinet Office approached Loughborough University to kind of identify new technology that could fix the problem with flood warnings in the UK, which is that they're only really available for large river systems in the sea, even though the majority of floods are actually surface water. So we needed to develop a new solution, and that's kind of where they approached us to actually develop something that was not just a new like a new scientific approach, but was actually something that could be operationally used by the UK government. So that was, I guess, the first real step towards getting something that was a bit more operational.
Yeah.
And then after I finished my PhD, I did some research on the project, and I think both me and my former PhD supervisor, Professor, kind of sat down and was like, I think this has got commercial legs in it too. It's not just an operational tool for government. It can help insurers. It can help humanitarian organisations and businesses. So we were lucky enough to get Innovate UK funding to do a kind of a market discovery, and what that involved was basically a very good program funded by the UK taxpayer of 20 grand to do a global market exploration. So I had pretty much an unlimited travel budget to travel anywhere in the world to visit people affected by flooding.
Wow.
And identify kind of what their problems were to help them fix their problems. And that helped us come from the groundwork of what we realized was definitely a very viable business.
How does it work from, this is completely sort of out my realm of kind of experience. How does it work kind of evolving a business out of a sort of academic exercise? Does the university still hold a stake or does it just?
Yeah, so the university definitely take a stake to get started, and obviously give the founders a stake too. I think every university has a different approach.
Yeah.
Some are kind of more generous than others. But again, we worked really well with Loughborough University, so they were pretty fair and gave us enough to incentivize us and kind of continued giving us kind of opportunities further down the road. So it's every university approaches it differently, to be honest.
Yeah, because it's such an obviously like positive way of approaching sort of development and discovery of kind of new ideas, because you're coming at it from an academic standpoint, so you sort of you're route agnostic in terms of kind of the commercials. And then so you can kind of, because one of the problems is sort of doing R&D inside a company, you've always got the company objectives are always overhanging you, whether that be budgetary or kind of the direction. Whereas kind of coming at something from an academic standpoint, I know we talked previously and we'll get onto it, but you sort of, I don't want to say stumble because it makes it sound like this is like no planning at all. But what I mean is that you sort of, you create the tool and then it's like, right, what are the applications for this, rather than, right, we need, we're trying to solve a specific solution internally. So there's huge positives from that kind of point of view.
Yeah, I think it really goes down to also, I think part of the challenge right now is that a lot of universities have such good research going on, especially on climate change, and the research and the kind of the data that's being produced is incredibly useful for the insurance industry. But I think the challenge is the universities over quite a long period of time have struggled to properly commercialize it and to actually get it used in the real world as much as it could be. And I think that this is where slowly there's a mindset change where more universities are forming spin-outs, because it just makes entire sense that, again, the universities they can commercialize it to an extent, but actually allowing a spin-out to just flourish and make its own path, bring its own kind of team members involved to transform kind of the research into something commercially operational is, I think, what's starting to happen more and more now, which is really good to see.
Because is it more common in my understanding? It's quite common in the US to do that. It's much more kind of common, much more commercially minded, but less so in the UK.
Yeah, I think the UK has a lot of catching up to do, and I think especially between the universities, some universities have had really good track record. Other universities, I think, have had a really, really poor track record. So I think, I think obviously Loughborough had a bit of a quiet patch, but the last few years there's been having like quite a few new spin-outs every year. So I think it's one of those things where a lot of it goes down to actually how the universities manage, whether a lot of them are afraid of spin-outs because they don't know where to go. Once you let a company spin out, again, they can take life. But I think slowly that the concerns are really being debunked, because I think you just need to kind of trust the founders and help them actually make something out of it, really, as opposed to try and control the process and just let it die if you do too much.
Yeah, so my point of view would be the university should be like the seed. It's almost like the seed round, and then they should let it run, because presumably once you make that decision to say, right, we're going to spin this out and make this a business, the type of individuals that you need to have involved in the business, they change, because you need commercially minded people that are not necessarily academics. What was your experience of that? Because obviously the business has grown now. Where did you kind of feel that you needed to bring people in? Where have been the key areas of kind of bringing in talent to the business?
So I think the first person we brought in was a CEO. Jonathan Jackson, he's kind of formed and kind of 3 very successful startups, some of which have made quite impressive exits. He was actually kind of advising us, and we got along very well. And I think we realized, what we needed was, we had some good academic backgrounds, but what we needed was more support on kind of how to build a business. And I think that was really a smart move for us, because I think other spin-outs that haven't hired a good CEO have really struggled, because you need to be able to raise investment to be able to kind of grow the business in the way that kind of you need to the real challenges in the early stages. You need that experience.
Yeah, sure.
And then also kind of from us working on kind of cloud was bringing in resources and expertise for that was also again the next step, which again at the university we hadn't really been doing. But again, when you're operational company in the insurance sector, you really need that experience. So it's trying all that kind of really exciting code that was written in the academic setting and making it ready for the commercial world.
Yeah. What's the main difference for that? Is it a security perspective, or just the robustness of that sort of code?
A lot is robustness, I think. Yeah. So I think to be able to scale up, we needed to change a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does the university help from the kind of
approaches?
Presumably you can have a little bit of a pick of the bunch for any sort of bright young bright sort of grads that you that must make things easy from that point of view.
I had to, again, I'm not just saying this, but again, we've been very impressed. So we've had Loughborough interns with us right from the start. So fortunately, Santander funded internships at Loughborough and quite a few other universities, so we've been taking them in. And last summer, we had two really bright ones that we decided we actually wanted to keep. Just happened that, there was a pandemic and they didn't really want to go back to uni during the pandemic. So we actually kept two of them on for a year in industry. They're still with us now. Yes, it's worked out very well for us.
But I mean, one of the things that we, I'm constantly talking about, because talent is obviously the thing that I focus on in the recruitment game. In that we're not very good at, particularly in the insurance industry, in telling our story into things like into the sort of graduate market, and that's why there's lots of people that you meet people in insurance, and how do they get into it? Because a family member used to working there. And I know your business is not exclusively in the insurance market, but what I'm sort of getting at is that because you're so directly related to the university, there's this kind of open line of kind of communication, so therefore you can tell the story of what the business is doing, and therefore it's much more attractive, because the transparency is the thing I talk about. People are attracted to, yes, good ideas and good stories, but it's really about the kind of finding out and really understanding it. I think a lot of businesses and industries, and insurance is one of those, doesn't attract talent because they can't tell their story very well or very transparently, because it's this big homogenous lump that says insurance on it, and people go, I've heard that's a bit boring, especially if they're graduates. Whereas you've got that direct line, so people can see what you're doing, and I think that kind of transparency is important, but also it's attractive, I think.
Yeah, I also think what I have to say, I guess when I was a graduate, I didn't realize how much science was actually needed to do, to do insurance properly.
Yeah.
So again, now that I'm kind of working with, CAT modelers and risk engineers, you realize how smart you need to be to do this well, and how scientific approaches that you can do to an extent in this academic background, actually how exciting it is, where you've actually got a lot of people in industry using that more, come in a different way. So I think there's definitely a bit of education, especially around geography, which I've always got a soft spot for.
Yeah.
Is actually helping geographies actually get into that space, because it is such an exciting area.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think it's something that the business acknowledges, the industry acknowledges that they don't do very well, but particularly, how wide-reaching it is, and geography is a great example. I wouldn't have known before I entered the industry that geography has such a direct application. But I always make, when I started in insurance, even actually, I was in insurance, and then I left insurance to go and work in recruitment into the insurance space. It was only actually when I went to the recruitment side, I'd even heard of what an actuary did, for example. So, if I did maths at university, I wouldn't even necessarily know that was an option. So I just think there's a big job to be done in sort of promoting how wide-reaching the roles can be, and there's engineering roles within it, and but geography is such an obvious miss, because it's so important to what the business does, that I just don't think we do a good enough job of kind of spreading that information out there. So I was going to ask you about the Lloyds lab, because that's how originally we kind of got in touch. How did you get involved in the Lloyds lab?
We applied.
Did you apply? Some people have applied it, you see. So I didn't know. But did you apply?
Yeah, no, we applied. It's actually we initially one of the first things when I formed the company I did was I applied. Right. And we got a response back saying, really exciting technology. I think you need to grow a little bit before you get back to us. So actually, I took that on board. Yeah. It was the first cohort. So it was literally, a few weeks after we launched the company.
Yeah.
But then kind of, 2 years passed, and we, we've grown a lot, now almost 20 people, and had a really good kind of product. But we had some early use cases, some cases with government, some with insurance, and we really wanted to kind of better understand how we fit into the Lloyd's market. So I felt the timing was perfect, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it just also happened to be that we were the cohort 4, which was kind of the first virtual one. So that was, as the pandemic was unfolding, we realized it was all going to be virtual, which I feel like was a very good time to almost actually reflect on our proposition and how we can make that work better for the insurance or for the Lloyd's market. While I guess everyone else was just trying to figure out what was going on, or at least we're being actually quite proactive and kind of co-developing something which was actually very effective in the end.
What was your biggest learn from that experience? What's the biggest takeaway that you've applied to the business, perhaps?
So I think it's probably not surprising. Obviously, I think the headline, what we realized very early on was, we came in open-minded, obviously wanting to win new business, but also generate, and what very clearly on, I'm sure it's not a surprise, use cases was one of those things where we just need to, the more you can't ever have enough use cases to be able to especially convince some of the Lloyd's market to actually adopt new technology. So what we did was create use cases and do some kind of historic assessments and validation, and what ended up being kind of our main thing that we produced was our Lloyd's Lab report, which is free to download on our website, where basically you can, where what we did was just look at estimating savings that could be produced from being proactive and mitigating flooding using advanced warning, making reasonable estimates based on historical events with our Lloyd's mentors, and really, taking that forward. So we produced a report, and I think that was actually a very effective outcome, because it helped us very much commercially, kind of taking it to the next level. But also, I guess, having something really tangible to then be able to present to non-Lloyd's insurers too, actually.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I mean, that'd be quite interesting to learn. In practical terms, what's the kind of service that you offer to the insurance industry? What's the kind of practical nature of the business?
So we are at our heart a flood warning company. So we developed a unique technology that is very effective at predicting the depth and time of flooding in the hours ahead of an event. So what we can do is provide actionable warnings. So for example, your property is expected to have a flood of up to 25 centimeters by 3 p.m. today. Warnings that we can send all and cover in our hydrodynamic model. So how the thing we initially sell is warnings to customers, so both commercial but also direct. But then there's also kind of further applications and claims. So I guess in the Lloyd's Lab, what we were doing was estimating the savings.
Sorry, Avi. I'm just going to
think of how can better.
Yeah, we are go seamless.
Okay.
Yeah. So you were saying about the offering is advanced flood warning to customers.
Yeah. So again, at our heart, we provide early warning and actionable warnings to help mitigate loss. So an example could be based on the latest rainfall forecasts, we've forecasted the depth of 35 centimeters at these properties and 25 centimeters at these properties that will occur, starting at 9 a.m. today. And then, so we're producing that, across the whole of the country. Now, the initial use cases, emails to customers, both residential and also commercial.
Mm-hmm.
But then, in addition to kind of the loss mitigation side, there's also helping in claims transformation and also kind of resource allocation and estimating kind of losses. But generally kind of improving the customer journey. So you're getting in touch with them before the event occurs, you're keeping in touch with them during the event, and then post-event, again, you've got all the information you need for a very quick claim settlement. So it's just, I guess, the getting ahead and being proactive even before the event occurs.
Mm. And that's much more down, it seems to be much more down the line of where we should be going with things, because it's the old model of just indemnifying against loss is a great model, but it's we've not been doing enough, certainly not on the kind of personal line side. I think on the commercial side, you see some of the risk engineering services that people have offered, and they'll go into factories and advise on kind of fire risks or other such kind of ways of reducing risk. But particularly on the personal line side or smaller commercial lines, we haven't done enough. I don't think, and arguably it's because the tools haven't been there to do it on scale. But obviously this, if you get a warning ahead of time, and presumably the principle is you raise everything up if you need to, if you're in one of those areas, and therefore you may get a claim, but that claim would be dramatically reduced from where it should be.
So again, for example, one of the use cases we looked at in Lloyd's lab was Hurricane Sandy in New York, where the art galleries were storing fine art in the basement.
Wow.
Now that needed to be moved to higher ground. I think that's probably the simplest use case, because it was just the fine art that was indemnified. So again, 100% of that loss could have been saved. But we've got other ones like car dealerships where, well, most of the losses would be the cars that are submerged. So you need to have a flood action plan. You need to know where to move them, and kind of the systems in place and early warning to then take that action.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've done that, then you've just got the building left to protect. So each use case is different, but there's a lot of kind of calculations that can be made, and the maths makes sense. So it's a no-brainer, really.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting as well, because it looks at more value-added services you can offer. Presumably you can kind of help with more kind of repair, and you can be more proactive across the value chain, as you say. If you're getting in there early, and therefore you're reducing your cost, you can kind of add more value, rather than kind of saying let's just reduce what we bring in because the claims reduce, therefore you don't always have to pass it all back. You can create a better insurance product, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
So the feedback from the market on the Lloyd's side, what was that like? Did you have much knowledge of kind of Lloyd's before you went in? Did you
I had some, but I learned a lot. Yeah, I think that's probably what everyone says. But I think you can always learn more about kind of the insurance market, but especially the Lloyd's market. I've been in a couple of accelerators now, and I think it was an accelerator like no other. It was really, really interesting that, again, because of the history, they were able not just to help us come commercial, but just like show us tutorials on like how the whole market works, and the history and kind of where they're heading, the blueprints, etc., and kind of try and provide us with data. So it was really, really engaging, really exciting. Just really a massive shame that I couldn't be there face to face with everyone.
I know, and that is sad, because that is a big part of the experience. And obviously I'm a service provider to Lloyd, so I didn't work in there every day, but I still loved it every time I had a meeting and it was in the Lloyd's building, and you just it's quite something. So it's a bit of a shame that you didn't get that experience, but I've no doubt you'll be welcome back in at some point in the future.
Yeah, I'll be showing up soon.
What surprised you most about the insurance industry, that you've kind of learned from your kind of dealings with it?
Good question. I've really enjoyed the conversations we've had with kind of the people with the scientific backgrounds who moved into the insurance industry. There's so much expertise, and also also on the propositions teams. So like you can often have a lot of excitement, a lot of really free thinking, and kind of a lot of co-creation at the right time. Again, it doesn't always happen, but I think there's some real gems all across the industry that we've really enjoyed kind of working with and talking to. So I think that's been I wasn't always expecting that, I think, right from the start. So that was, again, a very pleasant surprise. But probably from very early on, I never realized how complicated it was, because again, I'm not from the insurance industry. I'm from the academic background. So as I come studying my market exploration, I was constantly like really shocked. I was like, what? How many layers are there here? I did not know that this is how it works, especially kind of everything about the Lloyd's market. How the claims, how the kind of capital resourcing works and everything. I did not think that was that complicated before I got into it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think you touched on the collaboration there, and I think collaboration is something the insurance market does well, and obviously in Lloyd's you've got the subscription market, so collaboration is kind of inherent in the model. But I think I'm still surprised to this day that how much collaboration there is, and I swear it must be one of the few industries where I've worked in lots of offices where they've been providing it to maybe banking or alternative sectors. And there's still a sort of surprise when I can just pick up the phone to someone I may not know, and then they will help you and they will talk to you. And I think when you lump it in with financial services, you wouldn't necessarily think that. But I just would echo that, and I find it an incredibly helpful market. I think people are very willing to help and collaborate, and it probably doesn't outwardly look like it's going to be like that. So I think that's always quite surprising. I wanted to ask you about the non-insurance stuff as well, because insurance is a facet of what you do. But I know that you work with kind of NGOs as well. It'd be good to hear about more of the other work that you do that isn't in the insurance industry and the kind of application.
Yeah, so I guess where we started off was with government. So the initial kind of grants we got to work with government were working with the police, the fire and rescue, and emergency services. So again, providing them with a warning to help coordinate the event response. So position vehicles in the right places, kind of be proactive and supporting communities affected by flooding.
Yeah,
and that work's still carrying on. We also obviously realized that providing these warnings to businesses and housing associations, for example, helps them also be more proactive. So it's not just about the insurance industry; it's also about everyone who's affected by flooding, which is again the whole world really.
Yeah.
So about I think 17% of the globe is at risk of flooding. So what we've also then been doing is when I was doing my market exploration, I was visiting a lot of countries that had a lot severe flood problem coming in informal communities. So working in kind of Bangladesh and Kenya, and we were quite fortunate earlier late last year there was a grant available to kind of work together with Kenyan organizations. So we partnered up with the Kenyan Red Cross that we've been having a very good relationship with, and the Kenyan Meteorological Department. And we formed a kind of project to start providing our forecasts across the city of Kisumu, which is kind of one of the western cities of Kenya, kind of by Lake Victoria, and providing our service live there. So that's been happening for the last few months, and it's been a really effective project, and quite a good success story for us actually. So we kind of really wanted right from the start that while we can't describe ourselves as an insurtech, we are really focused on the insurance market. But I think there would be we're really keen to make sure that kind of our principle is that these warnings can help anyone, and we should be helping those that we can. So I think we'll just keeping that going, because I think it's really important to everyone at the team to make that work.
How do you balance that? Because presumably you know, presumably there's kind of a balance of resources, and one would imagine the things down the insurance line, for example, provide the commercials, but you know, you're not necessarily doing it for commercial reasons when you're working with certain other parts.
Grant funding helps. So
yeah,
that project was funded by Catapult, which is kind of the UK innovation grant program. So that helped. That allowed us to fund the work and to get it all going. Once you got it going, again, it's very low running costs, which we're happy to provide as long as we're kind of a commercially viable organisation.
Yeah. Well, you've got these grant fundings, and there was some funding from Loughborough. Did you get any external investment into the business side,
Yeah, so we raised an angel round in our first year, and then last year we raised got an investment loan from Innovate UK. So had a variety of sources to date.
Yeah. So what's the future? You know, last year was a difficult year for everyone. A lot of remote working, and things seem to be getting back on track for most things. Is there development of new sort of products and services? Are there more kind of collaborative pieces? Because I meant to ask you, sorry, I'm jumping back a bit, but as you were talking about the flooding, and I know I asked you this before, but because you're sort of challenging the kind of traditional claims model, you know, more proactivity, have people talked to you about using it in a parametric solution?
There's a lot of interest around that side. I think right now we're not doing anything on the parametric for a range of reasons, because I think it's one that we should always be thinking about, because it can really help. I think my challenge with it is we are constantly improving our forecasts. So after every single event, we investigate our performance, we see what changes we can make, and we make those changes instantly. That again, so that our trigger changes. So again, for parametric, it's slightly less suitable right now, but that could change in the future. So I think it's one where I think our claims proposition is less about parametric, but more about fast tracking and making a really speedy claim. So for example, if you have provided the customer advanced warning, the customers then communicated back saying this is what they've done, this is what, you know, they've managed to move their car and their TV, but there's some very small scale damage, probably likely to be in the 2,000 mark. I guess at that point, the insurer has a lot of information to be able to rapidly process a claim. So it's about actually, we've got a role to play in the claims process, certainly, whether it's parametric or actually just speeding it up and triaging. Is that's possibly where we're going to be more effective. But I think time will tell. I think very early days of parametric, I think it's going to go in a very interesting direction over time.
Well, it was the hot topic of last year, certainly for me. I was talking about it a lot, and obviously the guys at Flood Flash, and who I think you've mentioned, the guys over there, and I was just thinking the conjunction of two kind of technologies. You know, if you can proactively try and reduce the claim by, good warning, and then obviously you've got this trigger. You could reduce that trigger amount, or what's great is I think your business just gives opportunities for insurance businesses to be quite creative and proactive about how they produce insurance products and where it sits.
Yeah, again, Flood Flash is fantastic. It just gives them an option. Like, if you think you're good at managing your own risk, take our product, and you'll get payout. You don't need to have the whole claims process. I think it's complementary to also what we're doing, which is, if you think you're good at managing your own risk, well, here's a wanting to help you implement that. Hopefully that that can again help you in deciding what's the best insurance product for you.
I think that's it. I think it's interesting to see a lot of these things are putting control back into the hand of the consumer. They are exactly as you say. They're saying, how do you think you're good at managing your own risk? Then let's give you tools to kind of reward that, really, which is interesting. But I sabotaged my own question because I was asking you about the future, and then I sort of threw you back into parametrics. So apologies for that. But yeah. So Avi, what's kind of future plans in terms of kind of growth? Because you focus more on the UK.
So what we've been doing today was really making sure that our UK product works well and is very good. Now we're live across the whole of the UK, but last year, we raised investment to target the US. So we've been kind of gradually setting up our US product, and later this year we'll be going live across the whole of the US. So we're making very good progress there. We've also getting some early traction in Asian markets. So I think geographic expansion is the key. That's the main development, but it's also improvements to our product. So I think there's a lot behind what can make a very good early warning, and the key is we're not 100% accurate. Every forecast is going to have uncertainty around it. So I think that the key is what's going to make us successful now, but also moving forward, is being the leader in providing a very good proactive warning. So we're just putting a lot of resources into kind of the data analytics side, and the just getting all the information we need to make the product as accurate as possible.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, I mean, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the podcast. It's a really interesting area of the market, and it's nice to talk to someone from outside who's kind of like bringing new ideas, because I think touching on that collaboration aspect, what's very clear is kind of the future of insurance is up for grabs in terms of what it looks like. And I think that's what I like about, we talked about Flood Flash, but what I like about kind of a lot of these and your business is it's complementary. It's just saying that the insurance market can be served up as a product and a service in many different ways. And it's really exciting to see. So Avi, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Cheers.
Thanks a lot.